What if we've been following the wrong character? Ask almost anyone to summarize Snow White, and you'll hear the same answer. A beautiful princess, a poisoned apple, 7 dwarfs, a jealous queen, a prince, a happily ever after. It seems like one of the simplest fairy tales ever written. Good defeats evil. Youth triumphs over cruelty. The princess wins. The queen loses. But what if that's only the surface? What if Snow White isn't actually the emotional center of the story? Because if you remove the princess for a moment and focus only on the queen, something unexpected happens. The fairy tale stops being about envy. It becomes a story about something every human being eventually faces. Time. Not evil. Not magic. Not poison. Time. The mirror doesn't create the problem. The most famous object in the story isn't the apple, it's the mirror. Every day the queen asks the same question. Who is the fairest of them all? Notice what she doesn't ask. She doesn't ask, am I beautiful? She asks, am I the most beautiful? That tiny difference changes everything. Beauty can exist on its own. Being the most beautiful only exists through comparison. Psychologist Leon Festinger described something remarkably similar in the 1950s through social comparison theory. When there is no objective way to measure something about ourselves, we naturally compare ourselves with other people. Beauty has no universal ruler, no scientific unit, no fixed score, so people often measure themselves relative to others. Most of the time, this happens automatically. The comparison itself isn't the problem. The danger appears when comparison becomes the entire foundation of identity. The queen doesn't simply enjoy being admired. She has built her sense of self upon remaining first. The day everything changes. The queen herself hasn't changed. She still possesses wealth. Power, authority, status, nothing has disappeared. Only one thing changes. The mirror gives a different answer. Snow White has become the fairest. That's the moment everything collapses. Not because the queen became less valuable, but because her value depended entirely on winning a competition that could never remain permanent. Someone younger eventually enters every comparison. Someone stronger, someone faster, someone more talented, someone more admired. The mirror doesn't destroy her identity. It simply reveals how fragile that identity already was. The fear beneath the envy. Most versions of the fairy tale describe the queen demanding proof of Snow White's death. Older versions become even darker. She demands the girl's heart. Some versions mention other organs. Modern readers often see this simply as cruelty. But symbolically, something deeper may be happening. The queen isn't merely eliminating competition. She's trying to possess what the younger woman represents. Youth, vitality, possibility. It's almost as though those qualities could somehow be transferred from one body into another. The image feels disturbing because it reflects one of humanity's oldest desires. Not simply to remain alive, but to remain young. The queen never really hated Snow White. Imagine something different. Suppose Snow White had never existed. Would the queen have escaped her fear? Probably not. Eventually, another young woman would appear. Then another. Then another. The rival keeps changing. The underlying fear stays the same. That's why the queen's problem can never truly be solved by removing the competition. The competition was never the real enemy. Time was, and time cannot be poisoned. The apple doesn't bring death. One detail often escapes attention. The poisoned apple doesn't truly kill Snow White. Instead, it places her in an in-between state, neither fully alive, nor completely gone. This symbolic pause appears throughout mythology. Heroes descend into darkness before returning transformed. Persephone enters the underworld before emerging again. Many religious and literary traditions describe symbolic death preceding renewal. Transformation often requires interruption. The old identity cannot continue unchanged. Something must pause before something new begins. Snow White sleeps. The world continues. When she awakens, she enters an entirely different life. The coffin marks transition rather than finality. The ending changes only one character. The fairy tale ends the way fairy tales usually do. Snow White awakens. The kingdom celebrates. Love triumphs. Justice is restored. The story appears complete, but look a little closer, and something remarkable happens. Only one character actually changes. Snow White gains everything she was meant to have. But the queen loses nothing she was truly fighting against. Because nothing that happens to Snow White solves the queen's real problem. Even if Snow White had vanished forever, the queen would still wake up one day older. The mirror would still answer with the same brutal honesty. Time would still keep moving, indifferent to her fear. Her battle was never with another woman. Snow White was only a mirror reflecting the future she could not escape. The real enemy was something no kingdom could defeat, no spell could reverse, and no rival could destroy. It was time itself. It was mortality. It was reality, and that is why the queen was destined to lose. Because you can defeat a rival, you can silence a witness, you can even reshape appearances. But you cannot negotiate with reality. The mirror never created her fear. It only revealed it. Why this story still resonates? Perhaps that's why Snow White has survived for centuries. Not because most people fear poisoned apples, but because everyone eventually confronts comparison. The athlete watches someone younger break the record. The actor sees new faces arrive. The executive trains the next generation. Parents watch their children become adults. Every life includes moments when someone else steps into the place we once occupied. The fairy tale exaggerates the emotion. Reality makes it quieter. But the experience is remarkably familiar. Perhaps Snow White was never really a story about innocence triumphing over evil. Perhaps it was a meditation on what happens when identity rests entirely upon something that time inevitably changes. Beauty fades. Strength changes. Status shifts. Recognition comes and goes. If those become the only foundations beneath our sense of self, then every passing year begins to feel like a threat. The queen loses long before the poisoned apple appears. She loses the moment she believes her worth depends upon remaining first forever. Snow White simply reminds her of something always true. Time never stops moving. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson hidden inside one of history's most famous fairy tales. Not that growing older is tragic, but that building your identity around what cannot remain unchanged is. Every generation has its own magic mirror. Today, it might be social media, public success, appearance, or constant comparison with others. The technology changes, but the question often stays the same. What do you think the queen was truly afraid of losing her beauty, losing her status, or simply facing the passage of time? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe.